yes, it's, yeah, looks clear. So, before, before we start, shall I start with introducing Professor Tom Corcoran? Can I use this signal?
May do that.
If I raise this hand, can anyone raise the hand with me?
Only say good things.
Okay, no, yeah. If I raise this hand, everyone will raise a hand and the room will be quiet. That's a signal of the raising hand, right? Raising hand again.
My lunch just arrived, so I'm hoping that is
Okay, so you will have lunch together with the audience. So, Professor Tom Corcoran is our senior advisor to CMO Standard. He has been advising CMO Standard in the area of professional development of teachers and also policy advocacy. He has helped design the Chevron Enjoy Science in phase 1 and phase 2, and including when coming to recommending any scholars with best practices or with any technical assistance. He always help us connect with the best scholars that have experience, practical experience in the fields, including like Professor Joseph Krejcik and many others, the top researchers who we rely on their experience that in particular fields of both research and interventions. So he has contributed a great deal in the design and implementation of the projects. So that's why we invited him to share the logic models of this project, in which he also helped advise in the proposal development of the concept and the equities. So may I start with the first slide? Tom, as I talked to you this afternoon, that I will go ahead with my slide first, right? Giving you more time for some.
That's okay. I'm eating my lunch.
Okay, sure. Thank you. So, so I will present my slide first with that what we decide the step is not just only from the literature from the US, but also based on the M&E result from phase 1 and also some result in phase 2 that I will invite Yolak to share a little bit of what we have accomplished. And also some of the findings from the previous project that Professor Tom has been advising on, which is the INSTEP. We leverage, we learned from this project based on M&E. When we mention M&E, we mean that it's a rigorous study done by independent researchers, not implementing team, evaluate themselves. And we went through a rigorous study with the, semi-experimental design of the studies. That means there will be the comparison group that is not, it cannot be like randomized control trial, but there is the intervention group with the comparable comparison groups, and we involved in the study of the results that is not self-reporting result, but based on the evidence, which I show you later, that what data that we collect, right? We collect the observation data and we collect the test result. It's not the self-reporting result like a survey, right? So that is very important that when we claim that it's evidence-based, we collect the data that is collected by others, right? So in the first phase, we have components called STEM component and TVET components, and they have the questions that the researcher try to answer by collecting the data of the project. And next slide, please. The sample size, you can see that the STEM for TVET, the STEM ranging from over 6,000 students, with the teachers ranging from almost 300. And the sample size of over 147 for STEM, 79, and TVET robotics. So we collect the data and we provide interventions, and we try to study the result relevant to those intervention schools. And you will see the second paragraph, the bullet mentioning about the UTOP. This is the instrument that we did not develop from ourselves. It has been used widely in the US as a tool to observe the teacher's classroom, and it has been adopted in Thailand more than, I think, 15 years since the project that we implement with the government called IPST agencies. And the second data we use to own it, national test data. It's very important that at the end of the day, we cannot claim that teacher improve and how about students, right? So we have to put the right claim that our project impact on students, and what would be the proof if it's not national test data, right? So national test data is very important proof that the project that we have implemented impact on student data, which is measured by national test. And because it's high stake test that everyone care, not just only us, but when we talk to the government officer, we talk to the school leaders, they care on the same things. And that is very important when we think about the design. When Yaulak mentioned that we should not ignore about the M&E design, because we want to prove that our interventions work at the end of the 2 years program, or maybe if there is any extension, that means we have to prove. So in the first phase, MSI was the prime contractor of the research studies, and MSI worked with the national researcher teams led by Yaulak and her team, and some of them carry on the work into phase 2, and Yaulak continue to use regular studies using the same instrument, and with more adaptation that more relevant to STEM instruction, and she will share more. And we have the comparison group and intervention group, and we study in 3 periods of time to see the progression, if there is any difference among these 2 groups across the 3 periods of interventions, and see the difference in the difference among these 3 groups. Next, please. So the STEM result, right? And this is, we can share with you through the Impact Hub, the studies, that there is a published result of the Chevron Enjoy Science Phase 1, and these are the results that mention about the instructional practices by teachers, that they use the inquiry-based approach compared to comparison group. We also try to collect data about the ability of teachers in using the practices, including questioning strategies, and also checking on the skill development of students, and facilitate intellectual engagement through the tasks that the teachers assign to students. PLC, professional learning communities, is part of the interventions that we try to strengthen teacher learning through professional group learning. Yeah, and also observe of the more time on tasks by students. So at the end of the day, the joy of students when engaged in Enjoy Science lessons also have been observed that is more than the comparison group. Yeah, next please. instead project finding, even though this is not Chevron, through Chevron support, but it was a lesson that we learned as well, that in 2007 and 2008, when a module-based that heavily focused in inquiry-based learning are implemented in the southern part of Thailand. What has been a consequence through this introduction of the module-based learning through inquiry-based learning. So actually at that time there were almost 2,000 students study from almost like 53 schools, lower secondary schools, and we introduced these modules based on Smithsonian HTC kit and with the introduction of the equipment, and we found out that there is the correlation relationship between the exposure of insect modules and the ONET test, right? And at that time, we even analyzed the ONET item, in particular with the relevance to the higher modules. We use the item, analyze the item in physical science with the exposure to physical science modules, and there are close relationship between the exposure and the ONET test result. And this also result in the principle when we design the programs, that why we think that particular intervention is necessary, because we have proof that when it's properly introduced, it results in the higher student outcome and also higher teacher practices by Chevron Enjoy Sci phase 1 and 2. The next slide, please. Yeah, in this slide, I like Yavalak to share a little bit, because she has been very excited about the adoption of the UTOP, right?
So actually, at the beginning, we talk about UTOP. UTOP, it is like the tool for classroom observation, how the teacher teach, because we have like a assumption that if the teacher change for their practice, it will affect to the student. So that's why at the beginning, for Enjoy Sci phase 1, we use UTOP, that is classroom observation. But however, we realize that the UTOP is developed by the quality of the teacher in math and science teachers, but it not focus on STEM education. So that's why in Enjoy Sci phase 2, researchers and also our advisor develop UTOP and adapt to STEM classroom. So the result for Enjoy Sci phase 2, we have like, actually original 4 part of the UTOP. It is classroom environment, lesson structure, implementation, STEM integrated content and application. So we found that the teacher changed their practice after participating in professional development and also PLC. So you can see that we collect the data for 2 times, round 1 and round 2. Round 1 is dealing the project implementation, and also round 2 after the project finish, to make sure that sustainable of the teacher change their practice. So we found that the treatment have higher in 4 part of STEM classroom environment. They know how to use the lesson structure. They know how to implement STEM in the classroom, and also how can they teach the student to apply STEM in the daily life and real world situation. We found that the treatment school, intervention school, have high average score than the comparison school with significantly. So this is the success for teacher professional development, and also including PLC or professional learning community.
Yeah, and I believe that in the project like STEP, we will still continue to leverage these tools and maybe even adopt according to the researcher groups that our partners like you might want to bring on those researcher groups to continue researcher network and benefit from these two. Yeah. Okay. Next, please. Yeah. Now, Tom, I'm not sure if you have finished your lunch and ready. Get ready.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So you are ready for the presentation?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. Yeah. The floor is yours.
So I am on?
Yes, you are on.
Okay, thank you. Let me begin. I just want to make one comment about Chesser's slides. In the research community, we have known for 40 or 50 years that schools, basically there are three critical components to a school. There's leadership, there's the teaching staff, and the quality of instruction, and the curriculum. And we've known that interventions that address all three of those components are much more powerful, more effective than interventions that only address one. And one of the characteristics of Enjoy Science, which I want to point out to you, is that it has consistently addressed all three. It's provided professional development in high leverage practices to teachers. It has provided training to school leadership in how to provide support for teachers in using these new practices. And it has provided new materials, tested instructional materials that have been proved effective. And so it's a combination of doing all three things that has made Enjoy Science so successful. So let me turn now. I was invited to talk this afternoon about reforms in teacher education, particularly reforms that might be useful to Kazakhstan, where they face the huge challenge of recruiting and preparing 25 to 30,000 new teachers over the next few years. It would be a challenging task in any country. So I was asked to talk about reforms that might help them think about that, meeting that challenge. And there are two that I want to talk about this afternoon. First is the movement in the United States and in the United Kingdom in particular to shift teacher education to be more focused on practice, to move away from theoretical presentations to focusing on actual practices that are used in classrooms. And that has been particularly undertaken in the United States by the Core Practices Consortium, a group whose website I recommend to you to go and take a look at. The second practice is the development of alternate routes to certification in the United States and in the UK and in Canada and Australia, the Netherlands, and other countries. Israel, many countries have adopted alternate routes. And examples of those are the Teach for America or the Teach First program in the UK, and the state alternate route programs in the United States. Can you advance the slide? Next slide, please. So traditional teacher preparation programs, when we talk, have been criticized as being, whoops, I'm sorry, you skipped a slide. Can you go back one? You skipped, there's a slide missing there somewhere. No, go backwards. Let's just let's stop right here for a minute. I'll figure it out. So traditional teacher preparation programs, which are programs where a student attends a formal education training program at a university and completes the program and then takes a national or state licensing examination to be licensed as a teacher. These have been criticized as often being too theoretical and failing to address the actual problems of practice and failing to prepare teachers to use the practices that are most effective in the classroom. These criticisms have led to a number of reforms. What I'm going to talk about today, focusing teacher training more on practices that have been proved effective. These are known as core practices. Also creating stronger links between the coursework in the university and the classroom experience that novice teachers get during the program. So rather than having the student teaching all occur at the end of the program, it runs parallel to the coursework so that the coursework can inform the student teaching and the problems of student teaching can be addressed in the coursework. And third, having the universities hire expert teachers, experienced teachers, as professors of practice to bring the knowledge of the practice into the university program. So these reforms have been occurring over the last several decades and have proven effective at improving the quality of teacher education. Next slide, please. So I'm going to first begin with talking a little bit about the core practices. A group of American universities, which are listed here on the slide, began to talk to each other 20 years ago through meetings of the deans. And they were all facing common problems, that they were criticized, the courses were too theoretical, teachers didn't feel prepared when they went into student teaching, and there were important practices that they were not well prepared to use in their teaching. And so they formed the Core Practices Consortium that was designed to carry out several functions. They sponsored research on effective classroom practices. They shared the research findings and began then to identify core practices in each subject, practices that were essential to the effectiveness of a teacher in each major subject. And then they redesigned their teacher preparation courses on the mastery of these practices. So in these courses, these core practices are represented and described and examined by the novice teachers. And then the novice teachers rehearse the practices in the university courses so they feel confident that they can use them when they actually are in a school classroom. So I'm not going to read the list of the universities to you, but it's a list of prestigious universities. Many of the top-ranked universities are part of the consortium. So next slide, please. So I don't have time this afternoon to go through all the core practices in all the subjects, but this is a list of core practices for science. And when you look at the list, it'll seem familiar to you, because we've all known for some time that these are all essential practices. But facilitating classroom discussion, you want a general rule, Corcoran rule. Number one is that the more classroom discussion you have, the higher the learning performance of the students. And there's research to support that. Second, focusing on core ideas in science, so that in every lesson, in every investigation that goes on, there must be attention to the core ideas in science, so the students are getting deeper understanding of these core concepts and understand their application. A third thing, which is a little bit new, is eliciting student thinking about the subject, about science in this case, so that the teacher can understand what students understand and what they misunderstand, and can direct the teaching to correct misunderstandings and to deepen understandings. The fourth one is something I've already mentioned, which is connecting science concepts to their applications. So the point of doing investigations is to have students understand what these concepts actually mean in practice. And that should be also something we think about in STEM applications. The whole point of STEM activities is to deepen student understanding of the science and math concepts that we're applying. So engaging students in inquiry, having them actually involved in investigations where they can see for themselves what the phenomena are that we're studying, and what happens when you manipulate the conditions surrounding those phenomena, which is linking science concepts to phenomena. The seventh one, which is very important, some of these practices are important to every subject, and providing feedback to students is maybe the most critical one. The more feedback students get on their work, the better they do. I often share a story. For many years I taught a course at the Woodrow Wilson School at Princeton University, a course on education policy. And I would have students write a paper during the course, and I would have them submit a draft of the paper to me early, and I would read it and give them feedback on it, but no grade. And then I would ask them to revise the paper, and I would grade the revised papers. And the quality of student work improved enormously, and I think the learning improved enormously because of that process of giving feedback. So the more feedback students get, the better they do. Constructing and interpreting models. Model building is a really important aspect of science education. We build models so that we can illustrate relationships among variables, and we can provide explanations by referring to the models. So constructing and interpreting models is an important practice in science classrooms. Building a classroom community where students feel comfortable sharing ideas, feel comfortable giving feedback to each other and learning from each other, so that we learn as a community, not just individually. And finally, adapting instruction to the learning needs of students. Being flexible enough to change lessons when you notice that there's some students not able to participate or not able to keep up, to try to meet the needs of those students. These are the core practices in science, but there's in there's a list of core practices on the core practices consortium. There's a list for each major subject. And you'll notice that there's a lot of them, there's a lot of overlap. There's a set of them that are the same for every subject, and there are a few that are a little bit different because of the nature of the subject. Next slide, please. I've done research on instruction, and I'm familiar with the large body of research that's been done on instruction. And based on that, I would add to these core practices another 6. Lesson design, having teachers know how the structure of a lesson affects learning, and being able to design lessons that have that appropriate structure. Just as an example of that, we know from research that lessons that have an ending, a closing, where the teacher and the students summarize what they've learned and share that summary, is critical to effective learning. Lessons that have no closing, no ending, are much less effective. Understanding cognitive demand is an important practice. Teachers need to understand that various different kinds of lessons, different kinds of activities have different demands on students and therefore different results. Team learning, it's important to know how to create and manage teams so students can work together, learn from each other, get feedback from each other. The writing is very important. You know, as a teacher, I've often wanted to look inside of kids' heads and see what was going on in there. And of course, I can't do that. But when students write, and I can review their writing, then I can get a glimpse into their thinking, and I can see where they're understanding something or where they are misunderstanding, and then I can know what it is I need to reteach or how I need to teach it differently. So doing some writing in a class is very important. In fact, at Teachers College Columbia, where I worked, we had a motto, which is there should be writing in every class, every day. I think that's a very good principle to adopt. The use of questioning, how to ask questions that probe students' understanding. Good questioning is what formative assessment is all about, is asking good questions that get students to reflect on what they're doing and what they're thinking, and then maybe revise it. And finally, instructional time. We often forget that the best predictor of student outcomes is the amount of instructional time we devote to a subject. So if we devote too little time, we get poor results than if we devote more time. So thinking about how instructional time is like the currency of education. We need to be very careful about how we allocate it, how we use it, and we need to value it. So in schools where there are few disruptions of instruction, schools which do not interrupt instruction to dismiss students for extracurricular activities, they get better results than schools where there's a lot of disruptions. Okay, next slide, please. This slide I'll leave to you to read, but these are websites where you can find sources of evidence on instruction. These are all websites where they publish systematic reviews of research so that we can not just learn from one study, but we can get a a sense of the consensus about what we know from all the studies, major studies that have been done on the subject. And these are the major places to go to find those systematic reviews. I recommend you visit them and familiarize yourself with them so that this is what students ought to be reading. They should be reading systematic reviews, not single studies. And we could have a whole long afternoon's discussion about the importance of systematic reviews. Next slide, please. So core practices is the first big idea here that I want to raise this afternoon, that there are a set of practices that research has shown produce higher levels of learning. And the more the teacher uses them and uses them appropriately, the better the results. The second big idea are alternate route programs. And this is particularly important to Kazakhstan, where they have to increase the number of teachers very quickly. So a traditional route requires teacher to complete a teacher preparation program in an accredited college or university and to pass a state license exam, and then you can be employed as a teacher. And these programs are usually, they usually recruit young people, 18-year-olds who finish secondary school, and then they go to the university and complete their baccalaureate degree. Or in some cases, they may complete a baccalaureate degree and then do a master's degree or a certificate of education as a graduate program. But this is the traditional route for training teachers. Alternate routes are open to individuals who have completed a bachelor's degree in the past, but have no education training. And after some intense training, they're placed immediately into a teaching position and receive continued training and mentoring for maybe a 2-year period while they're employed as a teacher. And if they receive positive ratings from their faculty supervisor and their principal, they take the license exam and they become certified. These alternate programs are particularly attractive to career changers, young people in their 30s and 40s who for one reason or another want to change careers. Many engineers, for example, find that they've reached a kind of dead end in their work by the time they're 40. And they either have to advance as a manager or they need to change careers. Many in the United States, many military personnel retire in their early 40s, and they still have a good 20 years of work life. And they want to do something else, and they have technical skills, high skills that they've acquired during the military that could be useful in education, particularly in math and science and technology. So alternate routes are particularly attractive to these mid-career people who are looking to change careers or start a new career. Because they have families, they can't afford to go to college for 4 more years, and they need some way to be employed while they also receive training. And that's what the alternate route does. And next. So the elements of there are many kinds of alternate route programs. In the United States, there's several hundred of these programs. 49 states have them. A number of private nonprofits operate alternate route programs. Many universities offer them. So there's several hundred of them. And in Great Britain, there are a number of them as well. In most cases, first we have a candidate who meets some minimum requirements. They have a college degree. They have at least 30 credit hours in the subject they want to teach. They meet a grade level standard. Their college grades are either 2.5 or 3.0 GPA. They have no criminal offenses. And in the United States, or in most countries, they're also a citizen of that country. They are then made eligible. They apply to an alternate route program and they're accepted. And they go to summer training where they get a kind of a quick, intensive training in classroom management, in the school curriculum in their subject area, and maybe some basic pedagogy. They're then placed immediately after the summer in a teaching position. And they are asked they might start off teaching only half-time in some programs, but in some programs they teach a full teaching load. And while they're doing that, they receive support from a faculty member from a local university, and also support from a mentor teacher in their school. And they attend evening courses where they do more work on pedagogy and more work on curriculum, and eventually a second set of summer courses. And of course, they're also receiving support from the faculty advisor and the mentor teacher. After 2 years of this intensive mentoring and support, if they're rated positively by their faculty supervisor, the mentor teacher, and the principal, they are then made eligible to take the state licensing exam, and they do that, and if they pass the exam, then they are certified. What's fundamentally different about alternate route programs, there are two things. One is the teacher is employed right from the beginning. So they're in a classroom teaching as the responsible teacher, sometimes with a mentor in the classroom with them. And the second thing that's different is that the training that they get in the evening classes and from their mentor teacher and the faculty advisor is directly related to their teaching. So it's not theoretical at all. It's very closely related to their practice. Okay, next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, 49 states have alternate route programs. They're offered by universities, state education agencies, local school districts, and nonprofit organizations. And the details of these programs differ, but they all contain basically that same set of elements that I described earlier. 50% of new teachers in the United States come through alternate route programs. 50% of all the new teachers hired each year are trained through alternate route programs. So traditional programs in the United States have been losing enrollment. And in fact, some programs have closed because of the lack of enrollment, because of the popularity of alternate route programs. What's interesting is over 80% of teachers who go through alternate route programs are successful in state licensing exams. That's actually higher than the percentage of teachers that come from traditional programs. Over 90% of alternate route teachers remain in teaching after they've completed the program. That's much higher than traditional programs. So alternate route programs are efficient. They attract people who are committed to go into teaching and who are strongly motivated to do it. who tend to complete the program and then to stay in teaching when they've completed it. Okay, so, next slide, please.
Hi, Tom. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes?
Yeah, I like to take this opportunity to pause and listen to maybe some questions that the floor might
Okay.
have. Yeah, are you okay with that? Okay? Yeah.
That's fine, that's fine, you may have to,
Yeah.
you may have to repeat them for me. I have trouble hearing people in the room.
Sure, because I know that there are a lot on the slides, but
Any questions?
I want to stop here, and because we don't have a lot of time, and I know I ate up some of your time, could I,
Yeah, that's fine, there's only a few more slides.
can I ask for questions first, okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I must have some question, please.
This alternate route program. No, the alternate route program. Is it fee-based? Is it fee-based program? If yes, how do you motivate teachers to apply?
In the United States, all programs are fee-based. You know, students either pay tuition, or they maybe in some cases they receive scholarship. So traditional programs are fee-based, and the alternate route programs are also fee-based. There's a tuition charge by the universities who provide the evening courses, and those are the students. In some cases, that tuition is paid by the sponsor or subsidized by state government, so the student doesn't have to pay the entire fee.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Anyone else would like to raise any questions to Tom? Tom.
Yep.
Yeah. Because we have to move to the next session, can I interrupt your presentation with the last slide, with the logic model, because we need to jump to the next session. May I?
So you're going to cut me off in the middle?
I know it's hard, but we cannot cover all the slides, and this is also my bad, that I add many slides in front of yours last minute. I do apologize. Could we end?
There are not many. There's just, can we just jump through them and let me make a couple important points?
Yes, what slide you would like to make? What point?
We'll just go to the next one.
Okay, and then?
Okay, I won't say anything about that except to say that research has shown that alternate route program teachers are just as effective as traditional route teachers.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And this is the incentives.
The incentives are important here. This goes back to the question of fees. But if you're someone 40 years old and you're leaving the military, and you were an engineer in the military, you can't afford to spend 4 years as a student. You need to have a salary so you can support your family. So the immediate employment as a teacher allows many very capable people to enter in teaching. Go ahead, next one. So my big idea here is if we added the core practices training to the alternate route program, we could create a program where we were not only attracting more mature people into teaching, but we also were improving the quality of teaching at the same time. So I propose that we combine these two reforms, and then we could create a much better program. Last slide, I think. So in the case of Kazakhstan, well, you can read the slide, but if we imagine that in each province we prepared one university to offer an alternate route program and train the faculty to use the core practices. And the ministry launched an international recruitment program to attract career changers and military retirees into teaching. And we could get each university to support 500 alternate route candidates. In 2 years, we would have 17,000 new teachers. We'd be on the way to the 25 or 30 that are needed. And if we use monetary incentives to recruit 6 to 8 experienced teachers to form the core of the staff of each new school, so that in each new school there was a group of experienced teachers who could mentor the alternate route teachers we were bringing in, we'd have another 6,000 to 8,000 teachers, and we'd be close to our 25,000. So this would be my suggestion for a strategy for how we could train 25,000 new teachers in Kazakhstan. I give this to you for free.
You mean the solution?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tom.
Okay, I'm done.
Thank you. And then the last slide that we would like to share, that the logic model, the logical framework of what Tom mentioned about the core practices, right? It will start with create a buy-in from the stakeholders and also the university partners that we are going to recruit, and then we are going to share with them the core practices and the learning,
Yes.
and the learning units, right, that we think that will be used.
Oh, yes, I didn't mention that, but that's
Yeah.
very important, yes.
Yeah, the learning units that we think will lay the strong, solid foundation on science and math and also STEM. And then
And which contain the core practices.
yeah, and so the adaptation will be done by the faculty members, and we through the program will provide the consultation of the adaptation by the universities, and then the universities will deliver those courses that you adopt from of core practices together with the learning units. And then we hope that the faculty member capacities will be enhanced by delivering the course embedded with core practices and learning units. And the teacher mentors that provide mentorship to teaching students will be also part of the beneficiaries. They will receive training so that the quality of teacher of the mentorship will be improved. And lastly, we believe that the teaching students who are exposed to the core practices, they will be able to deliver the instruction with better quality and also equipped with the learning units that help students learn better. So these are the logical framework of our program, based on the core practices and learning units that we believe that it will make a change in student outcomes based on the experience that we have from Chevron Enjoy Science and the experience we work with faculty members in the past, I think 8 years of Enjoy Science. Thank you.
So,
Unfortunately,
thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Yeah,
Thank you.
for your time.
That was my brief and spectacular review of school teacher ed reform.
Yeah. So, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And unfortunately, we don't have time for questions on sense making. But I think maybe key insights that you got from this presentation you also take with you to our next session. And actually, we decided to integrate the break now, because we will be really breaking our today into second part. So first part was more about deepening into context of our countries and also understanding more what was the logic behind of STEP program initially and why, and